It's a bloodbath for big tech as thousands of jobs are slashed. 46 companies cut 21,000 people from their payrolls this month alone. From Meta to Microsoft, Twitter, and Amazon. It seems a reckoning is underway, and this might just be the beginning. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Big Tech's Big Cuts. It's been a tough year for the tech sector. The pandemic that sent online trade and commerce to new highs is hitting new lows in 2022. With inflation draining consumers and a recession likely approaching, cost-cutting has become the order of the day. This week, news emerged that Amazon may cut roughly 10,000 jobs, adding to the 120,000 cuts industry-wide this year. The new chief twit, Elon Musk, has been the public face of the problem for weeks now, but in reality, Twitter is just one of many companies that are struggling. Let's take a quick look at some of the worst affected.
Mark Zuckerberg placed an expensive bet on the metaverse, costing the company billions of dollars, ultimately leading to massive staff cutbacks. And according to the New York Times, Amazon is planning to lay off around 10,000 employees, starting as soon as this week, after its shares lost about 40% of their value this year. Twitter's new owner, Elon Musk, slashed the social network's workforce by half, and Snap is laying off 20% of its workforce, while the tech giant Microsoft has also announced around 1,000 layoffs. Meanwhile, e-commerce giant Shopify let go of over 1,000 employees, and the ride-hailing app Lyft cut off almost 13% of its employees.
Well, the sector saw skyrocketing but unsustainable growth during the pandemic. Employers now face high inflation and rising interest rates. But there are companies that haven't had to lay off staff like Meta has, and analysts say Meta's wounds are partially self-inflicted. Mark Zuckerberg placed an expensive bet on the metaverse, a shared virtual world. His company forecast as much as $100 billion in expenses in 2023. Investors have grown frustrated with Zuckerberg saying it could take a decade to pay off. The company is also fighting strong competition from TikTok. The mass layoffs, the first in Meta's 18-year history, led its CEO to send this message to his staff. Not only has online commerce returned to prior trends, but the macroeconomic downturn, increased competition, and ads signal loss have caused our revenue to be much lower than I'd expected. I got this wrong, and I take responsibility for that. So Zuckerberg may have taken some responsibility for Meta's losses, but he and other CEOs say it's macroeconomic volatility that's mostly to blame. But other analysts argue tech companies have been living the high life for years, and now the bubble has finally burst.
A lot of these tech companies spend like 1980s rock stars the last few years.
So how much worse can it get for the tech sector? And could it have a real contagion effect on the wider economy? Joining me now to debate that are from Washington, Shaun Waterman. He is a cybersecurity correspondent for Newsweek magazine. From London, we have Kevin Poulter. He is an employment lawyer and social media specialist at Freeth's law firm. And from Portland is Greg Nibler. He is a tech expert and the co-host of the technology and finance show, The Loop. Thanks all so much for being with us. Greg, I'll start with you. Are these massive layoffs really necessary for company survival, or is some of this actually kind of preemptive and cautionary because of what could be coming?
Well, I think it kind of depends on which company you look at. Twitter, I'm going to set that aside as its own kind of thing. But I think generally as a whole, part of these layoffs are a bit expected. I mean, you have the economic downturn that's going on. You have a lot of confusion going on just in the marketplace in general. And you also have over the last 2 years of how much hiring, especially the last 2 years, that a lot of these companies have done. And now it seems as things are shifting, consumer spending habits are changing. It does seem like maybe they overdid it a bit. So some correction, I think, is a little bit expected on that. The extent of that, that's where I think the real confusion is going to be, is how much more is this? Because this is just the start right now. We've got reports that Amazon is going to be doing that this week. It could have happened already. And I think that's where we just don't know how far it's going to go. But I think to expect some of it is appropriate.
Okay. I mean, is there a risk of them going too far, out of fear and caution and what their expenses might be when they really don't know? And then that can have adverse effects as well.
Yeah, I think Twitter would be one, again, kind of putting that as its own kind of animal right there. But Twitter definitely, it seems that they may have gone too far. At least when Elon Musk took over, they're already trying to hire some people back. So again, it kind of remains to be seen there where they go. But it's definitely going to be an interesting time for all of them.
Okay. Shaun, are you on the same page there? And if so, I mean, can it be kind of managed and hopefully corrected if there have been, you know, an abundance of layoffs, let's put it that way, out of, preemptive caution?
Well, I mean, I think, Twitter is sui generis, right? That is definitely, as Greg said, its own thing. I mean, Amazon's hired 800,000 people in the last couple of years. So, but this is a kind of correction. And I mean, it's obviously going to be not good for the people that are laid off. But I mean, they seem to be going about things rather more carefully than Mr. Musk did at Twitter.
Okay. Kevin, let me ask you this. How much of this could actually be due to excesses in the tech sector that they're sometimes famous for? I mean, it's not just the headcount, it's the over-the-top perks provided to employees sometimes.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the numbers, I think there's talk of about 120,000 jobs already across the tech sector being made redundant, laid off this year. Is it just about the money? I don't think it always is. I think we've got to look at sort of where these people are based, what their jobs are, what they've been doing. Again, we'll separate Twitter for a moment because 50% across the board cut seems to be pretty hefty. And I think 80% now contractors are rumored also to have been let go. These are huge and significant. And if they are impacting on sort of areas of moderation, for example, if they are sort of potentially putting Twitter and other social media platforms sort of within the grasp of the government controls, then there's a question around that. But talking about the money alone, look, Silicon Valley, the tech sector generally, has sort of led the way on the employee experience. Bringing in the ping pong tables, sort of 24-hour dining, trying to keep people in the workplace. It suddenly sort of flipped the other way. People have had a taste during the COVID pandemic of what life could be like when it's not 100% work. And I think that sort of new horizon for people, that opportunity, to work remotely, and we know that Mr. Musk is not a fan of remote workers, but where people have become sort of used to these experiences, this more flexible type of arrangement, suddenly, if that stops, if that changes, people start to look elsewhere. And there's a lot of competition out there for workers right now.
Is there, though?
A lot of people.
I mean, they're going to have somewhere else to go.
I think certainly in the UK at the moment, and I think in the US as well, unemployment's at an all-time low. Whether those jobs are in this sector or not is a different question.
Okay, I'll tell you what, hold that thought, because I really do want to cover that area in just a second. But before we go too far, because we're talking about the excessive perks and, Greg, let me ask you, I mean, are the heady days gone? Is there going to be a real readjustment? Will people ever be able to expect the kinds of sometimes just over-the-top perks that Silicon Valley offered, like a private welcome back to work Lizzo concert at Google?
I mean, I think it depends on what part you're in within each one of those companies, because a lot of it, like we were just talking about, remote work really became a big thing over the last couple of years, and a lot of companies have adopted policies that allow for that. I know there's things changing now where you're coming back in for 2 or 3 days, but are you going to get some of those same perks? That part may be gone. You may still get a Lizzo concert. I don't know. But as far as the excessive things in the workplace, if there's not a lot of people in there, if you're spending half of your time outside, I could see that kind of going away and being a way to maybe trim some of that off. But in the old days, I mean, that's how you really attracted companies or employees, excuse me. It was really competitive. You wanted the best of the best. You throw out all that stuff. That was just kind of what the culture was. It does seem like probably that's going to be tempered just a little bit going forward. I wouldn't imagine it going back to where it was, at least not right away, especially when everybody's making cuts right now anyway.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, did those perks really make them better workers? Did it just attract them to the workspace out of because the employers had a lot of competition? Or did it actually make them work more productively and be more grateful to their employers to have their positions?
I mean, I can't tell you for sure if that would make them more productive as far as that, but definitely it would keep somebody within the building probably if that's a perk that they were looking for to have that. And again, all comes back to that part of the culture, especially in Silicon Valley. I mean, that's just how it was. So if that's what you expect, if that's what every other company is offering, I would think that you'd have to do that to keep up with everyone.
Okay. Shaun, let's go back to what Kevin got started on and look at where these workers might go. I mean, could this be a case of, one man's loss is kind of another man's gain? So the talented people the tech sector is offloading are now available to other sectors.
Oh yeah, I mean, Aaron Berman, for example, the one of the senior people who does content controls at Facebook, tweeted out, when these layoffs started at Twitter, if there's any of the content moderation people, the safety and trust people at Twitter who are interested in a job, reach out. Now, he was also talking there about networking, opportunities and referring them to other people. But no doubt, some of these people who are very good at their jobs are going to easily find work elsewhere. That won't be the same for everyone. Amazon, for example, a lot of the layoffs look like they're going to be in the retail sector. I mean, that's that's a very different part of the job market. So, it's case by case. But I do think there is a huge demand for skilled and experienced tech workers, software engineers, and people like that. So.
Right. And that will
here
kind
in
of
the United States.
That'll kind of help mitigate any kind of contagion effect, will it not? Because these people will not be left unemployed. They'll just have to move to another sector where there's obvious demand.
I think there's.
Hold on, Kevin. I'll cut you in 1 second. Go ahead, Shaun.
I think that's right. Yes.
Right. So, Kevin, tell me a little bit more then about where or who might absorb these workers. We heard mention of the retail sector. I mean, are there other tech companies really still looking, or do you think the whole sector will move elsewhere?
I think that's a really good question, and we don't know. I think the risk is here that we're talking about some big players. We're talking about Amazon. We're talking about Twitter. We're talking about Meta. It's the trickle down effect that this might have. It's sort of destabilizing to the entire sector when the sort of the big beasts that have been around for now decades or more, they're struggling. They are struggling to make this work. Whether it's down to money, whether it's down to sort of bloat, as is referred to, and running a bit too heavy with employees. But it's going to be a big issue, and if that sort of does trickle down, if that does undermine the credibility of smaller organisations, of startups, sort of affecting the investment that comes into those, then it might be that sort of the whole sector is at risk here, and those who, well, unless they're sort of already well funded or privately funded, they may struggle, and particularly when we start talking about those generating ad revenues to rely on.
Yeah. Is there another issue here, though, and I want to ask on the more kind of micro level, and since you are an employment lawyer, about, who's staying in the tech firms, who didn't get fired, and how much their lives are kind of going to change with really losing a lot of colleagues.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be sort of endemic. That it's those who have been left behind really that are almost in the worst position. Their workload might well be desperately and drastically increasing. Their mates have gone. Their colleagues and friends are no longer around. And it's that sort of that employee experience again, that if you've got nobody to sort of play table tennis against, it's a pretty lonely life. So that's a real issue. And I think what's critical here is that I don't know if people are familiar with Blind. Essentially, we have something slightly different in the UK, Glassdoor, again, a similar thing, but it's about employee experiences and people reporting anonymously often into these things. I've got some statistics here, which I'll share with you for a moment, if that's okay. But of people left behind at Twitter, 89%, an incredible 89%, said that they no longer believe Twitter will succeed under Elon Musk. Now, if you're in a job where and Elon Musk's threatened bankruptcy already against its employees, if you're in a job that has no sort of permanency, there's no end, then you're going to be unsettled by that, and you're going to start looking elsewhere. And
Yeah.
that talent pool, which is still left behind and possibly sort of cherry picked or hand picked,
Mm.
might suddenly be looking to the door as well, and that can completely undermine
Yeah.
an entire
And
organization.
if you're not looking elsewhere, you might be engaging in the quiet quitting phenomenon, whereby you're putting in your least just to barely avoid getting fired, and actually really
That's
just
right.
injecting no energy or real contribution except for the
That's
bare
right.
minimum, and then nobody wins. Nobody wins.
So,
Let me
yeah.
move. Yeah, let me ask Greg quickly though, because Twitter especially. I mean, we know it seems to be hemorrhaging money. Musk says himself to the tune of about what, $4 million a day. But how much of that is actually down to servicing just the loan taken out to buy Twitter? I think it costs about $1 billion a year in interest, which is entirely on him.
Yeah, and I believe that too. I'm not an economist, but I did read that same thing, the $1 billion a year. And just to make up that money, I mean, Twitter is in some real trouble right now. And Elon Musk, with his public face as far as what he's tweeting out, is completely different than what he's telling the employees internally, which does make it a fascinating show to watch. I'm not going to lie. It is an entertaining, although, a lot of ramifications of this. It's a spectacle of
Everyone
what's
loves
going
a
on.
train smash.
Right? It's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, and even though I'm heavily invested on personally on Twitter, it's still something, I don't know how he's going to get himself out of this right now, as far as the way that he keeps posting. I mean, bringing back in ad revenue seems to be really the only way to really turn it around. And he's threatening advertisers that aren't advertising. So
Right,
that
and
seems like a little
advertisers see him as a liability now. And as for those employees, I mean, they have to, like we're talking about the ones that are left behind, they have to sit there and know that all of this is his mismanagement. It didn't have to be this way. What does that do for morale?
Right. No, it's got to be terrible, hasn't it, Andrea? I mean, you've taken a company which, was having a difficult time fully realizing its revenue potential, and you've turned it into a dumpster fire. Well done, Elon.
Right. I mean, Kevin, what kind of potential liabilities might he be facing now as well from those he employs and had employed that have now been laid off?
Well, around the world, there are certain sort of rules in place, laws in place to protect employees. And really, it's not just about protecting employees, it's about looking after the business. And certainly in the UK and many other countries as well, you have to go through a process of consultation. You have to speak to people before you make those decisions. You have to give them some warning about this. But also the point of that is to give them an opportunity to have their say, to talk back, to say, well, think about doing it a different way. Or if it is about the money, we can potentially look at taking cuts or reducing our hours or doing other things. I think, again, typically it's telling that Meta, 82% of people who have left behind believe that steps could have been taken to avoid these layoffs. Now, if 82% of people left behind believe that, why did the management not take heed? Why did they not listen? If there's no opportunity to engage, then you don't have that chance. So I think pushing back, but if you get it wrong, there's certainly cost consequences. If you're talking about sort of redundancies in the UK, then potentially not only is there sort of civil responsibilities through the employment tribunals, but also potentially criminal actions if you don't do things the right way. Leads to fines. Look, if you've got an unlimited pot of cash, does that really matter? But for a lot of organizations, it will. And by leading in this way, particularly Elon Musk, but others as well, by saying, well, look, we don't care if we get it wrong, we'll just pay people off. It sends the wrong message to everybody else. And accountability will come.
Yeah. While we're on that, I mean, Greg, let's look a little bit at the Twitter users, because they are also part of the kind of fallout here. They're watching him fire massive numbers of employees, mismanage this buyout. So for the users leaving Twitter, I mean, what are their options now? Where will they go? Because we have to remember, Twitter does provide a uniquely valuable experience for millions of people around the world. I mean, we're watching everything from what's happening in Iran to any major emergency. The first thing it gets out on is Twitter. So what's being sacrificed for the users, and is there a substitute for it?
Well, I mean, that's a really good point. Twitter is, extremely valuable, especially over the years. We've seen so many things happen on there, and just worldwide, the way things have been coordinated on there. So finding another experience like that, it's a little bit hard. I mean, Facebook is Facebook. We know what that is. It's not the same as Twitter. There's a lot of people trying out Mastodon. Mastodon as another social network. It's confusing. To be fair, I think it's going to be a while before that would be something that people would go to, and that's really what it comes down to for me anyway. For myself, as an avid social media user, there's not anything quite like that experience, at least as Twitter was. What it's becoming, that could be something completely different. And I think the biggest thing right now for every user of Twitter is confusion of what is happening right now. The check marks, and then the check marks are taken away, and then you pay for them, but then you don't get them, but then there's a gray check mark. There's just so much confusion from the top down, and like every hour on the hour, it's changing. So you just really don't know where things are going. And I think the other options out there aren't to the level of what Twitter really is right now. And maybe that'll change soon. Maybe give somebody an opportunity. But right now, there's just not that nothing that really has that global reach like this.
Right. Shaun, do you see anything anywhere that could potentially fill this huge void that could be created very soon? Because there's another opportunity to pick up those jobs, the unemployment across the sector now, if a new sort of Twitter is founded. Is there potential there?
Well, the problem is what social scientists refer to as the network effect. So if you have 5 people on an app, it's not very valuable. If you have, 500 million people on an app, it's much more valuable. And I mean, those effects that's what's made Twitter so useful. And really, it's going to be tough for any competitor to I haven't tried out Mastodon, but I mean, Greg, I'm familiar with the commentary I've seen about it, which is that it is a bit confusing and sort of seems to be siloed in various ways that people don't like. And I mean, I just want to say one thing, about Twitter though, because really the mismanagement is criminal. I mean, why didn't anyone foresee, because it was imminently foreseeable, that allowing people to purchase something for $8 a month, which had previously been awarded as a mark of authenticity, would cause problems. Brands that advertise on your platform. I mean, it just seems someone didn't think this through all the way. And, we know who that someone is. So.
But I mean, Kevin, is there any way that it could just, now that it's almost just been identified clearly that Twitter is in serious trouble with Elon Musk and he can't just offload it now because he's got way too much debt, can it not be copied elsewhere? Why would that be such a difficult undertaking for another large tech company to just say, okay, we're going to mimic this platform, move on over, and we'll institute kind of the same program that Twitter had before Musk took over?
Well, we've got to remember that a lot of other social media platforms have tried to borrow, or I won't say copy, elements of separate platforms which have been successful. Sort of reels we've seen elsewhere, so this sort of introduction of more TikTok-style videos to others. That I think one of the things that is available, of course, and that sets sort of Meta apart is that it has this diversification. It has the WhatsApp, it has the Instagram, it has the Facebook, which is, as that sort of is starting to struggle a little bit more with sort of new users, the other ones are still sort of surviving.
Yeah.
The growth is peaking, the growth's topping out. I think picking it up and running with it isn't as easy as it sounds, and we've seen others try and fail and just give up.
Right.
So who knows? Maybe there's somebody out there who can adopt it, but there is intellectual property contained in these things, and that's part of the wealth. That's part of the value.
Okay, Greg, I'll tell you what.
Twitter doesn't make any money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you copy something that's made a loss for every year except 2 for the last since it was invented. Why would you do that? Unfortunately, we think it's great. Journalists, reporters. We think it's wonderful, but from a business point of view, it's not a runaway success, which was why, some people thought it would be such a great idea for Elon to step in.
Yeah, Greg, I'll tell you what, we're down to our last minute and a half. I'm sorry, such a short time, but there is one part of this, the new technology that's being explored and how much job creation could be there, and that's the virtual reality sector. Do you see any real scope for employment growth to kind of pick up some of the slack of what's been lost, or is it still just kind of too speculative?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there because Mark Zuckerberg has said that he is going to continue to invest in that. I mean, he has made that his platform or his stand is to invest in the metaverse, regardless of whether it's successful right now, which it's not really. But he thinks that's where the future is. So I do think there's going to be some, I would guess, some job growth there. And then you also see Apple coming out with a report that they are actively hiring for their AR and VR side of things. They actually stated that they don't like to call it the metaverse, so they're probably going to have their own name, the Appleverse or whatever it is. But they are going to be investing in that too. So I think that's where, long term, or at least maybe a little bit more than the short term, that's where some tech companies are seeing some growth. So I would expect to keep up with everyone that there will be some more job growth there, at least based on the hiring scenes that I've seen. Some of the things that are out there as far as they're hiring for these data scientists and engineers to work in that. So yeah, seems like that could be an area of growth.
Kevin, 10 seconds. Are you optimistic about it?
Well, I think Mark Zuckerberg's gone all in on this, and he's got to bring people with him. There's just not there's not the mass appeal just right now. People don't have the headsets. People aren't connected to this just yet. They're not invested. So it could be money down the drain, or it could be the best money spent ever.
We're still waiting. Okay, that's going to have to be the last word. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists really so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thanks to our viewers as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter @_Newsmakers, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.